here's something weird. These two phones cost the same. Same customers, almost similar specs, even look the same. But if you give an Android user an iPhone, they will hate it. Give an iPhone user an Android, they will hate it too. Why? And it's not just because they are both self-absorbed douches who think they are better than the other. Yeah, I use Android, I would know. See, we have had this argument, which one's better, on Twitter, with friends, or even some random dude sitting across the world, and it never ends well. At some point, I started wondering, what are we even comparing? And the deeper I went into this rabbit hole, I realized Android versus iOS doesn't make sense in 2026. And it's not just about phones, it's about a near 2-decade-old disagreement over what a phone should be, and a few other things too. You see, for most of the history, Apple and Google weren't rivals at all. In fact, Google came into the picture much later. Apple started in 1976, where they built pre-assembled motherboards, unlike other hobbyist computers of that era that requires assembly. Phones came way later. The Apple we know today started in the late 2000s. That's when they launched the first iPhone. That phone had a stunning display for that time, a sleek design and an innovative multi-touch user interface. But Apple weren't just building phones, they were defining a feeling. This changes everything was their tagline with the first iPhone. And before you click away, this wasn't just a marketing slogan. Steve Jobs had strict internal guidelines about how the iPhone should function. Like even at the presentation, he noticed scratches in the display and decided to opt for glass right then and there. Meanwhile, Android. Their story is a bit messier. Technically founded as Android Inc. in October of 2003, but sure as hell not the Android we know today. There was a turning point in 2005 where they were bought by Google. Their jobs developed smart mobile devices that are more aware of the owner's location and preferences. Yeah, they launched a device with HTC, but it wasn't exciting at all. Kiddish design with rounded edges and a hideous sliding QWERTY keypad. The implementation was bad. There was nothing special about it like the first iPhone. Nobody even considered Android to be in the same playing field as Apple. But it all changed in the year 2010, where it was still a huge year for Android. It is when Samsung introduced its first Galaxy S line of smartphones. It launched in several variants and would eventually grow into the most popular brand of Android devices. This move worked really well in Android's favor. To date, Samsung has sold more than 100 million of Galaxy S phones. The first Galaxy S featured a 4-inch Super AMOLED screen, a 1 GHz Hummingbird processor, and a 5 megapixels of camera, thus establishing the flagship series of that era. You see, Android wasn't chasing a closed or controlled ecosystem. They were chasing an open ecosystem, prioritizing user freedom, extensive customization, and diverse hardware choice from various manufacturers. It was designed to compete with the iPhone, and that marked a turning point for Samsung in the smartphone market, which sold over 24 million of the first Galaxy S smartphone. Samsung hoped that their Wave series would sell millions of units too, but the company was juggling multiple OSs at that time, and Android's explosive growth put an end to their Bada, Symbian, and Windows Mobile along with other software lines. The first Galaxy S had a 4-inch panel with a pentile arrangement, that is 2 subpixels per pixel, not the usual 3. It was arguably the most impressive screen we had seen until then. Samsung popularized the AMOLED screen so much that it basically became mandatory for premium devices in 2026. You know, there isn't a single flagship device that doesn't have the OLED screen right now. But here's the thing, at the same time Android was launching with outrageous hardware, Apple was building something completely different. The iPhone 4. It was another great step forward from Apple, and from the great quality of the build, to the camera, to the respective apps, to the brilliance of the Retina display, the iPhone was an all-round winner. You see, where Android was using specs and benchmarks, along with huge customizations to attract the crowd, Apple was focusing on creating a seamless, secure, and intuitive user experience. Those are two phones, you know, both iconic, both dominant, but popular in completely different disciplines. And this right here, this is what people forget when they argue about Apple and Android. They are not just different brands, they are different ideas. And once you know that, you start noticing it everywhere. You know how Apple designs its chips in-house, tuned only for Apple hardware and software. That's complete control. Fewer cores, absurd efficiency, and insane consistency. Performance feels linear, and everything feels just right. The iPhone uses less RAM on paper, and it works because everything from the CPU to the GPU to the OS are all designed together. This enables Apple to extract more out of their chips. Similar with camera, hardware looks modest, yet it keeps up with bigger and better sensors from other manufacturers. And it's undoubtedly the king when it comes to videos, even after all these years. Their output is elite due to their tight ISP. If we talk about Android side of things, manufacturers use tech to overcome constraints and scale everywhere. Raw horsepower matters more here. Big numbers, benchmarks, but sometimes this causes uneven delivery. RAM is also generally higher on Androids. Here the hardware compensates for software variability. Brands started adding vapor chamber, active cooling, and whatnot to hold their peak performance for longer periods of time. Same with camera. Outrageous numbers on paper, massive sensor counts, periscope lenses, under-display cameras. But since every part is not controlled by a single manufacturer, quality varies widely. Tech will seem ahead of its time unlike Apple. Android believes the user should control the device, and Apple always believed that the device should, not the device should control the user, but support the user, and there are multiple ways to phrase this. Anyway, both approaches work. There is no good or bad. Alright, that was a bit nerdy, but nerdy stuff is kinda important. You know why? Because everyone at the time did not consider these two platforms as competitors. Android started out as a software for video cameras, and they were completely two different things. You see, for some time, Apple kept improving on what they did the best. The iPhone 5, the iPhone 6, the iPhone 7, and they are still building elite smartphone experience. Android, they went all in on tech, full screen devices, multiple cameras, soundtrack 3D screens, built-in projector, the Samsung Galaxy Beam 2012, optical zoom camera, the Galaxy S4, glasses-free 3D. It was made by HTC and LG. Well, long before Apple even thought about making their phones spec-heavy. Apple believed that constraints create better products. And for a while, they were right. During the 2007 to 12 era, it was pure Apple dominance. One screen size, no widgets, no default app changes, no customization. It is during that era when they said you were holding your phone wrong. But then something changed. Apple goes Android Lite. They introduced app library. They also added widgets on home screen. They also added default app flexibility. And we should not forget that file access improvement. Still locked down, but undeniably more open than before. Just then, Android started locking down on booting, stopping bootloader unlocking in the name of security, and introducing Google Play integrity for custom ROMs. Suddenly, they were not speaking different languages anymore. They were chasing the same thing. Not innovation, not features, not specs, but the average user. A person who wants one device to work, entertain, pay, shoot, navigate, and to disappear into daily life. By the late 2010s, it was not just about how the phones performed anymore. It turned into something bigger: image, loyalty, identity. Apple and Android brands weren't building phones anymore. They were building sites, billboard ads, YouTube videos. Apple would take a shot, Android manufacturers would fire back. Literal side-by-side comparisons. It was bigger than numbers, of course. Of course, it was about benchmark, but it was also about what each phone stood for. Apple was for the purist, Android was for the tinker, and people who bought them, they started picking them like teams. The rivalry wasn't just real now, it was personal, almost like it was part of the marketing all along. And from then on, the brands got closer and closer. Today Samsung and Apple make some of the most technically impressive phones in the world, like Apple's Air line and Samsung's Edge line. They're faster, they shoot better, they last longer, and they are more capable than ever. Somewhere along the way, the lines started to blur. Well, Android started shifting too. The shift didn't happen overnight, but if you look at the timeline, there is a clear turning point at around 2017 to 19. Before that, they were polar opposite, but starting with the iOS 11 in 2017 and Android 9 in 2018, these two operating systems began aggressively trading features. While we were busy debating blue bubbles versus green bubbles, Google took a long hard look at Apple's playbook and decided to copy the best parts. We call this the Appleification of Android. It started slowly, but now it's undeniable. Google realized that people don't just buy phones, they buy convenience. So they built their own walls. We got Quick Share to rival AirDrop. We got Fast Pair to mimic the AirPods magic. They even tightened the integration between Android and Chromebooks to mirror the Mac iPhone continuity. They stopped waiting for other manufacturers to fix the fragmentation issue and build the glue themselves. Then there's privacy. This used to be Apple's high ground. But notice how similar the permission screens look today. That little green dot in the top right corner when the camera or mic is on, that wasn't an Android original, guys. That was Google realizing that Apple's strict approach to permissions wasn't restrictive, but it was rather reassuring. Modern Android, it's ruthless. It kills background processes to save battery, just like iOS. It restricts file access with scope storage, just like iOS. Google effectively admitted that to get to Apple level of smoothness and battery life, they had to implement Apple's level of control as well. This all made Android a little less Androidy, if that even makes sense. Meanwhile, while Google was busy building their walls, Apple was busy slowly tearing their stuff. For years, using an iPhone felt like living in a nice, very expensive hotel room, where you weren't allowed to move the furniture at all. You had a grid of icons. That was it. No gaps, no widgets, no hiding apps you didn't use. And once you start looking for it, you see Android's DNA all over the modern iPhone. Predictive swipe typing, Android had that for years. Group notification, Android fixed that mess way before iOS did. OLED screens, Samsung was putting those in phones while Apple was still defending LCDs. Even the always-on display, a feature that was meant to show your time without touching your phone. Apple took 6 years to copy after Samsung made it standard. It feels like they've started trading places. Borrowing each other's ideas. And somehow, we are still arguing, still picking sides like it's life or death. Still acting like one is obviously better than the others. Why? For years, Apple and Android fans couldn't agree because they were defending two completely different ideas of what a phone should be. Two totally different user experiences. But now, those differences aren't as clear anymore. I mean, sure, they're different. They still prioritize different things. DNA doesn't vanish just like that overnight. But if you tried explaining to someone why you prefer one brand over the other, without going into the history, it would be pretty hard to put that into words what exactly makes each brand special. We still argue because the phones we love become a part of who we are, and I am no different. Why do I love Android so much? Is it the wide customization? Is it the ability to flash custom ROMs? The history? Yeah, mostly. It is. But if I'm being honest, it's probably more than that. Here's what it comes down to really. Most of our preferences aren't preferences at all. They're accidents. They're accidents that became identities. Maybe you were a broke college student when your last phone died. You couldn't afford the $1,000 flagship, so you bought the one which was $300. Because that phone was your lifeline during those years, you learned it works. You learned to flash custom ROMs to get it on the latest software, because software updates on older Androids are unheard of. Today, you have the money to buy whatever you want, but you still buy Android. Not because it's better, but because your identity is built on being the person who doesn't buy into hype. And my story could have gone 100 different ways. Maybe if I came across friends who are into the whole blue bubble thing, I would be an iPhone guy by now. You never know, and that's the point. We don't always choose phones based on specs. We pick them because where we end up and what feels right at the moment. And this is why this brand rivalry sticks so hard. Because they feel like a part of us. And when we defend these phones, it feels like we are almost defending ourselves. So whether you are an Apple guy, a Samsung fan, OnePlus, Huawei, Xiaomi, it's all about what you value behind the screen. Maybe try something different every now and then. You might hate it, or you might find a whole new kind of fun in that device. You never know, and that's the point. What's your go-to phone? If you like this breakdown, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel. It helps the channel grow a lot. Thanks for watching. This is Orko. You are watching Eraser Ninja, and I'll catch you around.